Welcome everyone to another episode from Off the Arrow Shelf. Quick update on what's been going on. The house is wrapped in scaffolding. For those of you who aren't aware, we are having to have a new roof fitted. We are waiting on the building inspectors to come out and inspect the work that's been done so far. It's all the building regulations, certifications. In fairness, the roofers, the guys that came in, they've been pretty amazing. It's just everywhere is a bit of a tip where you've got piles of tiles everywhere, gutterings everywhere, bits of wood. It's making me feel exhausted and I'm feeling pretty run down. So things have been pretty intense. We are still trying to get the insurers sorted in for the car. It's supposed to be going into the garage for the repairs after the hit and run the other week. We are waiting on the garage to confirm that that's going to be possible. I have to say, I've taken a hit. I'm not sleeping very well. I'm struggling to concentrate. Anyway, on with the main focus of this podcast, which is to do with the proposals for 2024. This is going to be very focused on the National Field Archery Society for the simple reason that the NFAS magazine, the November to December 2024, arrived on people's doorsteps, letterboxes, whatever you want, or can be downloaded from the site. And that arrived this week. And in there is a host of proposals for voting and for people to, or rather I should say, for discussing. Now, this is going to sound a bit confusing and I want to explain what goes on here. Every year, the NFAS, or the Society, opens up its doors to allow its members to propose rule changes, modifications, new shots, new kind of concepts of the rules. And each year, this takes place just before the AGM of the Society so that these proposals can be discussed, modified, wording changed at the AGM. The voting for these proposals then goes out in the January-February issue of the magazine for members to vote on. Proposals can cover everything from a simple rule change to a far more complicated, maybe new form of round or new scoring system. This year, as I said, the magazine arrived on the doorstep when Thursday, I think it was, and I've been sitting down and reading through the proposals, and there is a wealth of proposals. So in this podcast episode, I want to talk about them, offer some thoughts, offer some views, but most of all, encourage society members to read the magazine, download the magazine, if you don't have a printed copy, and you will hear the pages ruffling because I've got lots of notes on this one, to go through, read through them, see which ones are applicable to you, because not all of them may be. There are some shooting style specific ones. There's one for freestyle, so only people who are shooting freestyle can actually vote on that, but there are others that are open to everybody. And also give some consideration to attending, if you're a member of NFAS, the actual AGM, which is taking place on the 16th of November. So that's in a week's time. Hence the reason I'm trying to get this podcast out as quickly as I can. The actual meeting, the AGM meeting, is taking place in Eggington. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I think it's Derbyshire. And it's at the village hall there. But only members of NFAS. It's not public location. It's not, you can't go and attend if you're not a member of the Field Archery Society. But I think it's in Eggington. The details are on page 23 of the National Field Archery November-December magazine. Anyway, as I said, there are a ton of proposals. There's 15, I think. So it's going to be quite a discussion. Some of them are quite confusing, but I'm going to start off by going through these, and I hope you'll find it interesting. If you're not a member of the society, if you're not interested in this, fair enough. These are my opinions, these are my thoughts. It's not right or it's wrong, it's just my thoughts on it. But those of you who are maybe across the pond might be interested in hearing the sort of discussions that are currently taking place and revolve around maybe rule changes or amendments to the rules. So let's dive in there. The first one is a change of committee roles and titles. And this is, from my understanding, it revolves around involvement of the Child Protection Officer and making them more crucial and identifiable. And what's interesting in this proposal, it cites how the Child Protection Officer is at the front of the society and should be seen because they will be investigating any cases of intimidation of children, any very serious cases like paedophile issues and stuff like that. I think this is quite a good thing, though I do question that whole title of Child Protection Officer, because when we look at this, and when I do this at work, it's not just child protection, it's vulnerable adults as well. There are people in our society, and I've coached some, that have learning difficulties or are classified as being vulnerable adults. So I think if we just focus on child protection, I think we forget about the aspect of the adults who may also be vulnerable. But that's my thoughts. So that's the first proposal. That's probably one of the easiest one. Second one is for the bow hunter class. Now the bow hunter class, this is a specific one for bow hunters, so that would mean it's amendment to the rules associated with that shooting class, and that would mean only those members who are in the bow hunter class would be able to vote on this. So when you go to register for voting, you specify which shooting class that you actually shoot under. So I normally register as either hunting tackle or American flatbow. This means that I can only vote on either, whichever one I put in. So if I put American flatbow in, I can't vote on hunting tackle. If I put hunting tackle in, I can't vote on things that are focused on American flatbow. So this is bow hunter. This is a slight modification to the rules where it stipulates that the archers can shoot in that class with 3 fingers under the nock of the arrow, as opposed to having to use Mediterranean or split fingers. And it's explained that basically this means that it is easier, and a lot of bow hunters or a lot of compounds are set up in such a way as to accommodate 3 fingers under as well as split finger. Personally, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I think it's probably quite a good inclusion. I think it's quite sensible. So that's one. So if you're a bow hunter, go have a look at this. And bow hunter, for those of you who don't know the classification, it's a compound bow with no sights, no release aids, no D loops. It's basically a really stripped down compound bow, kind of equivalent to the bear bow equivalent for a compound. Proposal C, that's a bit more complicated. This is to do with a rules change which would see all members of the society being able to use binoculars. So this would be a rule that anybody in the society, any full member of society, would be able to vote on. What's interesting about this rule is I find it a bit confusing, as it appears to contradict itself, in that the proposal states that the archer has 3 uses of using binoculars, or monoculars as they say. Where's the exact? Just trying to find the exact words. May be used freely until archers shoot their first arrow. Then further binoculars use is prohibited, even if they take a second or third. Right, there's a couple of things here I find this confusing. 1, until archers shoot their first arrow. So does this mean the first archer in the group, which means everybody can look until that first archer is shot? Or does it mean the individual archer who is shooting, allowing the other members of the group to continue to use the binoculars? So that's the first thing. It also stipulates that you can't then use it after your first shot. So you can't look through the binoculars to see where your arrow has impacted on the target. That's the other thing I find confusing, because In a section where it says identify the benefits of this new proposal, it states there is also a small but added benefit in knowing whether arrows have scored or not, so that the subsequent arrows are not shot unnecessarily. If you can only use your binoculars before you shoot your first arrow and not afterwards, how can you then use your binoculars to check to see if your arrow is in or not? And this is, from my perspective, certainly with paper faces, is actually a very useful aspect, because some of the paper faces, it's not easy to identify if your arrow is in or not. I find it a bit contradicting. I personally think it'd be a great idea for people to ever have binoculars, but I think this makes it quite difficult, and it also makes it quite difficult to marshal, because it would mean, how do you know that's their first arrow if the first and second pegs are next to each other? So it could get quite complicated. Are you relying on the other members of the group having binoculars and using binoculars to be able to tell you if your arrow is in or not? Which is a little unfair on them, I think, because they might not be able to afford a high-spec binoculars, so might not be able to see. Likewise, they may not wish to use binoculars, so they may not have any in any case. I think this could be rewritten to just allow people to use binoculars, full stop. Same as presently in the unlimited class, the crossbow class, and compound limited, where they have basically free use of using the binoculars whenever they want. This rule seems to be reads very similar to the barebow rules, the current barebow rules, where the barebow archers can only use the binoculars prior to their first shot and not after that, which I find, again, going back to what I was saying, where Marshall is concerned, is quite confusing. The other thing about this is I'm not sure as if this rule comes in, would that change for the classes that already have binoculars? I don't think it would, because those are class-specific ones. And there is a comment that shoot organisers can decide if they want to have a... what's the phrase is? Clubs are at liberty to have shoots where optical devices are not allowed. Yeah, okay, fine, I get that. That's fine. But currently, one of the benefits of using binoculars is removed because you can't check to see where your arrow falls. And quite often that's, from my coaching experience, that's when I tend to use binoculars most, is to tell people where their arrows have landed when I'm taking them around and I'm teaching them to shoot at distances, or even on the range when people are trying to get their gaps in. I'll have my binoculars or I'll have my spotting scope set up at that distance, and I can tell you, yes, it's dropped low and left, let's say, to 7 o'clock, or it's high and right, that kind of aspect. Proposal D is specific to freestyles only, and it is, again, it's a binoculars one, where they're proposing that freestylers can use their binoculars freely once they've set their sights. Yep, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, it's specific to freestylers, and there's not that many freestylers in the society. So, yep, fine. Proposal E is a proposed new shooting round called the bow hunter round. This is a type of course as opposed to a shooting class. And this one, it changes the scoring. So you either have a 2-arrow round or a 1-arrow round, and you would shoot 2 arrows at every target or 1 arrow at every target. If you shot 2 arrows, each kill would count as 10 points. Each arrow that hits the body, as in not in the kill, is a negative 2 points, and any miss is a 0. And if you're doing the 1-arrow round, it's 20 points or -5. I like the idea of the round, because the thing that they do with this is that you don't have to have your foot behind the shooting peg. You can position your foot. There's a 360 movement, as they call, around the shooting peg. That I quite like. What I don't like is the negative scoring. There's been a few discussions about this on various Facebook groups. If they change that so that the wound or the body hit was only 2 points, or was only 5 points and not a negative, I'd be fine with this. And the reason for it is I feel that it's a double penalty. A double penalty. If you've already missed out on getting the kill, you're not going to get 10 or 20 points. To then have that as a negative, so not only you're actually down not 10 points, but actually 12 or 25 points, or your potential. So I feel it's a double penalty. It'll be a challenge for course layers, because you're going to have to, when you're setting a peg, you'll be thinking about where, or 360 degrees around that peg. I, from a course layer's point of view, would find that quite interesting, because sometimes people will think, oh, well, I'll go forward of the peg, and it will actually be a harder shot than sitting back from the peg. I like the concept of it. I don't like the negative scoring. I think, especially where we have some of the NFAS faces that are out there, where the kills are not necessarily where you would expect them to be. Some people say they're not anatomically correct. I'm not going to get into the anatomy of different animals and faces, because the issue being it depends on the angle that the photograph was taken. But what I do know is, when I've been marshalling and I've been talking to archers, they've put their arrow exactly where they believe the kill should be, and they've ended up with a wound because it's offset to the left or the right, or it's higher, or the kill's actually higher or lower. And that's caused confusion, because the fact that they thought it was a good shot, the arrow landed where they wanted, but it didn't score what they were expecting. And you could argue, well, you need to learn the faces. That's fine, but not everybody has got exposure to all the NFAS faces, of which I think there's over 80 now, and there's new ones being added all the time. From my perspective, I feel that the negative scoring, drop the negative and just let it be 2 points or 5 points, because you're going to be, if you hit with a wound, you're going to be 8 points down on somebody who's got a kill. You can get that back. Trying to get back the effective 12 points, that's really hard. And it's also the aspect of what kind of distances are you setting your shots at, which will have an impact. The other proposal F, is very, very similar. It's another round. It's classified as they've called it a bow hunter round, which is confusing because there's two bow hunter rounds, or two things being listed as a bow hunter round now. I think these are probably being put in by two different groups of people, and that's something to bear in mind. I didn't say when you do a proposal, it's not just one person putting a proposal in. One person puts a proposal in, and it has to be supported or seconded by others. And for this to be discussed at the AGM, those people who are proposing have to attend the AGM, or at least one of them. There's no voting done at the AGM. It's just discussions taking place at the AGM. So proposal F is another bow hunter round. Interestingly here, though, it makes a statement that targets to be set at realistic distances. Archers will shoot the course as two different rounds. First round shooting 2 arrows at each target. Second round shooting 1 arrow at each target. Suggested maximums of 18 to 20 targets, because they're effectively going round twice. Now, that's nice. That's clear. Again, though, I don't like the point scoring on this, because of the fact that it seems to contradict. It says first round 2 arrows from a peg score 10 points for a kill, 5 for a wound, or 0 for a miss. Okay, that's fine. So you would get maybe 10 points if you got 2 wounds, 15 points if you got a wound and a kill, 20 if you got 2 kills. Okay. The second round, though, you got this negative aspect again. You've got 10 points for a kill or -2 for a wound. But then it says again, second round, 1 arrow from peg, scores 20 for a kill and -5 for a wound. My apologies. But I don't quite get that. These are kind of examples of what they can do. Again, if it didn't have the negative aspect, I'd be more than happy with this. I just don't like that negative. I think you could also make scoring a lot more complicated. I've seen enough people struggle with the scoring system that NFAS has now, which is just basically adding 20 to a score or 16 to a score. The concept of them having to think, okay, well, it's a 2-hour round, he's got 10 with his first. Actually, it's a 1-hour round. You could end up in a situation where people are carrying negative figures forward. You could have a run of negatives and then suddenly get a positive, but still being in the negative, if you follow what I mean. And again, that's a personal thing. I think the problem also is, what is a hunting distance? What could be considered a hunting distance? My understanding of listening to podcasts like the Push Archery and people on YouTube and other podcasts is that trad hunters tend to shoot 15 to 25, maybe 30 yards if they're feeling really confident of. And that is, I think, closer than compound archers would classify as a hunting distance. So this is going to be so reliant on the course setters to be setting shots that are hunting distances without necessarily being hunters themselves. So I think that may be problematic. Again, this one is one where it says people are free to use binoculars, and also there's a 360 on the peg. Again, there's a risk assessment associated with being able to be anywhere around that peg, because obviously you're going to be having to think about different heights of people, different bow styles and stuff like that. It's a greater challenge for the course layers, but in some ways I quite like that, and that's speaking as a course layer. I'd quite like that challenge. Again, like Proposal E, Proposal F, I quite like the concepts. I don't like the negative scoring. And Proposal F, because it's a new shooting round, everybody would be able to vote on it, not specifically or limited to one group. Okay, G. Which one's G? I've kind of that's a rule amendment for G, and that's because of the fact that it's stipulated presently in the rules that archers have to have their foot behind the peg, and if the bow hunter round comes in, they need to change that so it doesn't have to be behind the peg. Their comment is a part of the archer's body much touch any part of the peg they are shooting from. So you could have it that you're in front of the peg and your back foot is touching it. Okay, again, that would be for everybody. Proposal H is a specific one for traditional crossbow, stipulating that no sights are allowed. I thought you were allowed to shoot over iron sights, but they seem to want to have the goal of the traditional crossbow, I'm reading it directly from here, is to use bows without sights. Sighting aids allow an archer to make adjustments to a bow that allow an archer to retain consistent aiming point while adjusting the bow itself for specific distances, placing those using this as an advantage. The amendment seeks to remove the advantage of this. I thought you could shoot fixed iron sights in this currently, and by the sound of it you can, but they seem to want to just remove it entirely. Yeah, okay, that's their rules. That's their class. If they want to do it, fair enough. Personally, I think that's a bit sad. I quite like the idea of having iron sights, but I don't shoot that class, so it's up to them. Fair enough. That was Proposal H, and that would be so J. Oh, this one goes back. This is another version of changing your foot position on the peg. So I'm guessing this has probably been put in. There's two of these proposals, both associated with the foot on the peg. My guess is that this comes in because of the fact there were two proposals for this new bow hunter class. And again, this would be open to everybody. Their comment on this one is the archer foot or knee must touch the peg they are shooting from. A course layer or shoot organizer may choose to tighten this rules, for example, requiring the archer's leading foot or knee to be at the rear of the peg. This is basically saying, as opposed to the other one, is saying, yes, the archer can be in front of the peg, but if the announcements at the beginning of the course turns around and says, no, you can't, you've always have your foot behind, it allows that. Whereas the other proposal, which is Proposal G, didn't specify that. So it's basically a proposal that allows the club to make a decision if they wish to. I quite like that. I like the idea that if a club doesn't like this bow hunter style, it might turn around and say, well, actually, I want to stick to the current rules. It might make it more complicated for the archers attending the shoot, but gives a degree of flexibility. Proposal K is to do with an archer moving in front of the pegs before they shoot. Now, this is interesting because I've been to a number of shoots where you're walking up to a target, and rather join the target at the wasp or the red peg, which is usually the furthest peg, you might come in halfway into the shooting line. It's really bad thing to do from a cosplayer's point of view. Myself, Steve, and the other guys at the club and other cosplayers around the country desperately try to avoid doing this, because what can happen is that if you're walking into the shooting lane, there might be people shooting that further down and not see you walking in. So I really don't like the ability to do this, but it happens on courses because of the terrain, because of the paths that are going around. And this is a clarification on that. Again, this would be open to everybody to be able to vote on. And that is letter K. Sorry, I'm getting my numbers and letters all mixed up. What am I up to now? L. Which one's L? I'm losing track. Oh, right. This is interesting. L, and takes quite a bit of reading, and I've read this a few times now. And I've got a bit confused about it. Where this is concerned, you have 13 different shooting classes in NFAS. The thing where that is concerned is people say this gets really quite complicated. And there's an attempt with this to group those classes together. And the idea being is that the classes, it will go to just class 1, 2, and 3. With an option for a class 4 if you have sighted bows. It's the idea being that class 1 bow is shot off the hand, longbow, primitive, with wooden arrows. Not sure where horsebow comes into that, because horsebows are quite often shot off the hand. Then you have class 2 shot off a shelf. There's AFB, thumb draw, bow, bear bow, and traditional bow hunter, which is confusing because they've got comment here wooden arrows, and traditional bow hunter you can't use wooden arrows. And then the classification of other longbows, flatbows, and recurves as above with carbon arrows. So it's a bit confusing because TBH is traditional bow hunter, and you've got to use carbon and aluminium arrows. You can't use natural arrows in that class. So why it's under the wooden arrows class? And that's the other thing that gets really confusing, is that they've written it. It goes class 1 bows shot off the hand, or e.g. class 1 longbow, primitive, wooden arrows. Then it goes class 2 bows shot off the hand, or e.g. class 1 AFB, TD, BB. I think that's a typo. I think that should say class 2. And then class 3 is carbon arrows, and an optional class 4 for those who want to use sighted bows. I can understand in some ways the rationale of this, but I think there's typos in it, which is probably what's causing me confusion. Because normally class 1 and 2, they're saying in here is like natural arrows, but you can't do TBH with natural arrows. There's a comment about shoot organizers may want to add additional clarifications, and I think they would need to. It's a way, I suppose, of speeding things up. I'm not sure how people would feel about this. I can see sort of primitive and longbow going together, because some of the primitive bows and longbow scores are quite close at times. Hunting tackle, would be, I guess, in class. My hunting tackle rig would be in class 3 because it's not shot off a shelf, it's shot off a rest, but it's not with carbon arrows. So I'd be in a class that would be shooting against people using carbon arrows, even though I'm using wooden arrows, because of the fact it's not off the hand. So I'd say class 2 should, I don't know. I think there should be a distinction between that, because I don't think it's fair for people who are shooting wooden arrows to be up against people who are shooting carbons. Proposal M is adding a new clarification to the binoculars rules, where binoculars are not allowed to be used on the course unless stated specifically in the rules for the style or class being shot. Again, this is proposal M, clarification based on all the other changes that are taking place and trying to tidy up the rules. I really wish there was just a definitive rule book currently for NFAS, because right now you've got to download the rules, then you've got to download 2 different sets of amendments and kind of cut and paste them into your own rule book. That's a side issue. Excuse me. The next one, which is N, face walking. This is an interesting one, and I wonder if there's a long-term plan here. Currently, face walking is only possible in unlimited and freestyle. What this rule amendment brings in is archers using face walking or string walking must shoot in freestyle and unlimited shooting styles, or in a class where shoot organizers class rules permit. So if you're running a shoot yourself and you want to allow traditional bow hunter or bear bow to use face walking, you can then specify that. And I can see this in some ways being popular, because face walking and string walking is quite popular in other bear bow or other organizations, because it's classified as a rule that's allowable, or a technique that's allowable in bear bow. So I think that's what this one's pertaining to. I think it's trying to bring us in line with some of the other organizations that have bear bow rules. What's my feelings on this? From my perspective, yeah, okay. What would be interesting is a lot of these rules are saying that shoot organizers can or make amendments or their own club level rules. And the problem where that's concerned is in that initial briefing at the beginning of a shoot, where you're reminding everybody about what rules are and aren't allowed, is going to get longer and longer. And I think that could be detrimental, or it could have an impact in how long it takes to get people out on the course, and also offers potential confusion. In itself, I don't see a problem with it. The only concern I have is ensuring that all organisers actually do accommodate that and remember to say, oh yeah, are we allowed to do it or aren't we allowed to do it? Because if they say you aren't allowed to do it and then you do it, in your breaching rules, if they don't say anything and some people aren't aware that they're allowed to do it, then it could cause problems. Proposal O is a big game scoring change, and this is the last one, so you'll be glad to hear that. There's been lots of interesting scores put in recently, definitely by the compounds and crossbow guys, where they're nearly acing an entire course. They're hitting the 24, the inner kill every time. And what they're talking about here is it's getting harder and harder to identify the difference between the top archers. So what they're proposing is that the pro ring scores 28 points and the inner kill scores 24. This does make a lot of sense in many ways, because the pro ring is usually the smallest ring on the target face, or 3D. The issue I have, and it's not an issue, it's more something I want to highlight, is that you're going to have to probably be marking up your 3Ds so that it's clear as to what would be the pro ring marked by a P, what would be the inner kill, and what would be the kill lines, because certain 3D targets do have an awful lot of different markings on them because they're used across the world in different shooting classes and rounds and stuff, which is fair enough. But it does mean that it could offer confusion. Now, I'm guessing what they mean here is that if it's a 3D, if you hit the animal, that's usually a wound, and then the first scoring zone in is the kill, second scoring zone in is the inner kill. However, others have multiple rings inside that. So would that be the next ring in, or would it be the smallest ring? So I think you'll need to have some form of clarification for that. And once clarified, it will probably make it an awful lot easier for people to identify what is what. The other thing is, what about paper faces? All the NFAS paper faces have a wound line, a kill line, and an inner kill line. So that would mean that those would have to be changed potentially with an additional pro ring added to it. Now, the 24s on some of those are tiny anyway, and I'm not sure how easy. Well, I know how easy it would be because it's basically drawing another circle on the master copy before it's sent to print. But that would require a little bit of work. What's my general thoughts on this one? Okay. As far as I can understand it, that would be for everybody. So if I was lucky enough to hit a pro ring on a target, I'd get the 28 points. It's not just compound archers. It's a real small change. One of the things I've always thought with this scoring is that you get this bonus if you are shooting your first arrow. But if you get an exceptionally good second arrow, you score the same as somebody who's just lucked into the outer part of the kill. If they're going to do this, I'd personally like to see something similar being addressed so that maybe an inner kill for a second arrow is 18 points. So it'd be slightly better than a wound for your first arrow, but not as good as a kill. I think that would be fair, and you could do the same again for a third arrow where it would be, say, an inner kill would be 12 points. I think it would probably be fairer because then it keeps this kind of 4x4x4. But if they bring it in, yeah, fair enough. I do, but as I said, personal view, if you're going to have that, then give the other people that get a really good second arrow a bit of a bonus as well. That's it. Those are all the proposals, and yes, there are a lot of... I do suggest everybody goes and reads these. Take your time to read them, and read them a couple of times. I've got a notebook next to me with all the notes I've made when I've been going through it, and I'm hoping to attend the AGM. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but I'm hoping to attend the AGM because I think there'll be a lot of discussions. I think this will take a lot of time to discuss because there'll be lots and lots of questions. Have a read when the final versions of these proposals do come out in the magazine. If you do feel strongly about things, I encourage you to go out and vote on it, please, because otherwise you don't get a chance. Or rather, you lose your chance, I should say, of making your views clear. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time and patience for listening to this somewhat longer podcast than I'd actually anticipated, but there is a lot out there. Have a read. I might see you at the AGM. There's no mention about them doing like online this time. In the past, they've done... Oh, yes, they have. Sorry, I do apologise. On page 23, if you email the General Secretary, they're going to try and allow people to attend remotely via Zoom. So that's quite nice. And that's it, guys. Thanks very much for your time. I hope your shooting's going well. And if you've got any questions, drop them into the comments of this. These are my views. This is my interpretation of what's said. I may have got it wrong. If you're one of the guys who have proposed this and you want to clarify it, please comment on the podcast, drop me a message, and we'll see where we go from there. But in the meantime, the most important thing is get out there, enjoy your archery. It's turning quite a bit colder this week. There's a lot less leaves on trees, and the leaves that are here are no longer green. They're doing that beautiful patchwork of browns and yellows and reds. Have a great time. Enjoy your archery. Stay safe. Keep well. If you want to reach out to me, do so via the podcast. You can find me at offthearrowshelf.com, offthearrowshelf@yahoo.co.uk. I'm on Instagram. I'm on, was Twitter's now X. I'm also on Threads. There's a page on Facebook. Take care. Stay safe.